Hey everyone, thank you for everyone who's joined so far. I'm here today with Amy Slack from Surfers Against Sewage. I believe Wendy, our marketing manager, had actually alerted me to the work that Amy's been doing. And when I started to read into it more, I just thought it would be fascinating for her to come and share with you not only the work she's doing, but also that she's a woman working this space. And typically I find that a lot of conservation work is you don't see a lot of women in conservation, so it's really nice to see you taking on the stand and also within water. So just a bit of background, I come from a consulting sector and haven't worked in a water utility, but I definitely know people who have, and there aren't definitely a lot of women in that space either. So it's nice to have you here. I'll just do a quick intro on Amy. So Amy is a passionate ocean activist. She's the head of campaigns and policy at Surfers Against Sewage, and she's responsible for leading the charity's campaign, policy, and project work around water quality, plastic pollution, ocean, climate, and ocean recovery. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my PowerPoint to work, which is really frustrating. I've just got this like green bar of doom going at the moment. So yeah, oh gosh, not quite sure what's happening now. Oh, it's not responding.
I was going to ask.
Okay, here we go. Right, I think we are there. So let's hopefully everything works in this PowerPoint now. I'm just going to put it to present it to you. Okay, cool. Right, so I'm just going to share my screen. So have you set up so I can share?
You can do, yes, you
cool. And so, and I just need to share my sound. So can you remind me how to do that? That'd be great.
So if you tap on your microphone.
Hang on, I need to make this go into view again. Sort of lost the control panel. Oh yes, here we go. So I tap on more share sound. Cool. So I'm hoping that this will work.
Yep.
Cool.
All good so far.
Okay. It's just great. So just gonna great. So everything working at your end?
Yeah.
Cool. So I just want to start by saying Happy International Women's Day. It's really great to be here and talking to you today about women in climate action. Thank you so much for the lovely intro as well. And I'm just going to be talking a little bit about protecting and restoring the ocean and link that into kind of what we do at Surfers Against Sewage. So, hello, my name is Amy, as we've just heard, and I'm a swimmer. I am a cyclist, and I'm not such a good surfer, but I'm trying to learn. So for the purposes of today, I'm also the head of campaigns and policy at Surfers Against Sewage. So Surfers Against Sewage is an ocean conservation charity based in Cornwall, right down on the south coast. So those of you who know Cornwall, we're in St Agnes on the north coast. We've been going for we existed back in the 90s. So we were essentially a bunch of surfers who were sick of getting sick from the sea. We were a single issue campaign group that wanted to improve the water quality along the coastline in Cornwall. But we're more than surfers and more than sewage now. So we tackle a range of issues that affect the ocean. So our key campaign is around water quality. It's still a core part of our DNA. It's where we started them 30 years ago, and is a really important part of what we do. We also work on plastic pollution, which is another campaign that is close to our heart and one of the ones that we're most well known for. The ocean and climate emergency. So we've been working on the climate crisis for the last 10, 15 years or so, but mostly through the Climate Coalition, which you may have heard of. But last year we launched our own sort of ocean and climate emergency campaign, and we also work on ocean recovery. So that's restoring and reviving our ocean environment. We mobilise around 100,000 volunteers every year to do beach cleans. But we really kind of view that work as not just picking our way out of the problem. It's really important to us that we use the evidence we collect from the beachfront to put pressure on those in the front benches of Parliament. We've got 800 plastic-free communities. So those are communities that are looking to rid their community of single-use plastic. And we work with over 3,500 plastic-free schools now. So those are bringing the youth movement into the kind of the plastic agenda. So a little bit about me. As I said, I'm head of campaigns at Surfers Against Sewage. I've been working in the environmental sector for the best part of 15 years now, which is amazing to me. I did a degree in psychology with geography and a master's in advanced environmental and energy studies. And I've worked in a whole variety of sectors. So I've worked in local government, I've worked as an environmental consultant, and now I work for a charity. So lots of experience and primarily from a sort of, in my old job in sort of environmental consultancy world, worked primarily in waste and recycling. But the ocean's been really important to me my whole life. I grew up in Bristol, but I spent a lot of my time on the coastline learning. I used to be a sailing instructor. It's a really important place for me. It's a very special place, and it makes me feel relaxed and calm and revitalized when I go for a swim. So I just wanted to start by asking you all to close your eyes. I want you to imagine that you're surrounded by water in the ocean. Take a deep breath and dive beneath the waves. You swim down through the towering cathedrals of kelp, shimmering shoals of brightly coloured fish, parting to make their way as you glide through the salty underwater world. Covering the seabed below you is spring green seagrass that moves gently with the currents, and tiny seahorses grip at their stems. You slowly ascend to the surface, emerging into a cool sunshine. And now open your eyes. So that world we imagine below the water is really fastly disappearing. The ocean makes up 70% of the Earth, but it's being hugely impacted by the climate crisis. The ocean is one of the biggest carbon sinks on Earth. It's absorbed around 98% of the excess heat that's trapped in the atmosphere, causing the temperature of the ocean to rise about 2 degrees since the Industrial Revolution. And the rate of that warming has doubled since 2003. So that's really drastically changing our underwater world. We're seeing ocean habitats all over the world being destroyed. And what you can see here in this picture, what used to be a kelp forest, so something that you imagined when you dive beneath the water just now. And that's being destroyed by, this one in particular is being destroyed by purple urchins that's now able to survive in habitats that they couldn't do in their past because of the ocean warming. And we're seeing destructive practices such as bottom trawling and industrial fishing that are also ripping up those habitats at a remarkable rate. So I'm hopefully going to move on to something now. Maybe this isn't working. It was going to be a link to a YouTube video. Oh, here we go. So hopefully you can see that. Yes, cool. So the absorption of the carbon dioxide is also causing the ocean to become more acidic. That's a process called acidification. And that's causing big problems with creatures that live in the marine environment. So I'm hoping this will play. Slowly loading. So what you'll see here is the impact of acidification on petropods. So petropods are small snail-like creatures that live in the sea. On the right, you can see the petropod that's living in less acidic conditions, and that has a clear shell and it's moving around really well. However, on the other side, you can see on the left, that's been in more acidic conditions and has a really cracked shell and is having difficulty swimming. So that really shows us kind of the impact that things like acidification is having on our ocean environment. And what we really need to solve these problems is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So we need Rachel. Rachel's a single mum living in Penzance who started doing beach cleans. Rachel was really fed up of seeing plastic strewn all over her local beaches. And she wanted to do something to stop the problem getting worse and to stop plastic getting there in the first place. So she brought her community together and started up Plastic Free Penzance. So she brought together local businesses, community groups, schools and councils to rid their community of single-use plastics. And Penzance was the first community to get plastic-free status. Rachel now works for Surfers Against Sewage, and she leads the plastic-free community movement overall at a national level. As I said before in the intro, there's over 800 plastic-free communities working to rid their community of single-use plastic. Plastic's a massive problem. We see about 12 million tonnes of plastic entering the ocean every year. It entangles marine life and birds, traps them below the water where they can't breathe, or impedes their ability to move freely. Plastic's also mistaken by whales and sharks and turtles as food, as we all know. We see horrific pictures all over the news and in social media. It eventually kills them by filling up their stomachs, inhibiting the ability for them to feed. So plastics can cause isolated coral bleaching as well. So they tend to they'll get stuck on coral and they'll tend to warm the environment around those coral and bleach them. And we don't actually know the full impact of plastics on humans. What we really need to do is turn off the plastic tap at source. We need individuals like Rachel's and communities like Penzance to really turn the tide on plastic pollution. This is Becky. Becky lives in a small town of Yorkshire called Ilkley, that's right next to the River Wharfe. Now, Becky really enjoys wild swimming in her local river and started noticing that more and more sewage waste, like period products, toilet paper, and some of these horrible solid materials that you would not want to swim in, started seeing them more and more in the water. And as someone that works in the health service, she started to get really concerned about the impact that this could be having on the health of thousands of people that use the river for swimming, kayaking and playing every year. So she started to investigate what was going on and found that there was a local water company that was discharging sewage into the water. And it seemed like they were doing this at an increasing rate. There was no monitoring of how this might be affecting the popular local swim spot, and no real obligation for anyone to do anything about it. So Becky set up a little local group, and she started applying for the stretch of river that is really popular for swimming in Ilkley to be designated as bathing water, and that places the legal obligation on government to monitor and improve the quality of the water. So Ilkley was successful in getting the UK's first ever river bathing water in 2021, so just last year. It's unfortunately been found to be rated as poor, meaning that there is a continuous serious risk to human health. But now, because they've got official bathing water status, there's now an onus on the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water, the local water company, to clean up the river. So the problem with sewage pollution is huge. In 2020, sewage was discharged into the environment over 400,000 times, totaling over 3.1 million hours of discharge. And over 90% of sewage outlets discharge directly into rivers. Now, this is causing huge problems in our rivers and the ocean. Only 14% of rivers now meet good ecological status, and none of them pass good chemical tests, which suggests that there's really serious issues with sewage, agriculture and chemical pollution, as well as urban runoff. And last year, we conducted our own citizen science project at Surfers Against Sewage, and we found that of the rivers that we tested, 75% posed a serious continuous risk to human health. And of course, rivers flow directly into the sea. They have a huge impact on the ocean, as well as life in the rivers. So on the coast last year, we saw over 5,500 sewage discharge notifications. So sewage discharge events into designated bathing waters. These are beaches that are really popular for swimming. They're where we swim between the red and yellow flags, or we're on holiday, or on our local beach. It's where lifeguards keep us safe from water. And they're generally really, really popular areas. And so we don't think that there's going to be a risk of pollution in those areas, but there is. We recently worked with an organisation called the European Centre for Environment and Human Health, and we conducted a research project that found that we were getting just as sick now as we did back in the 1990s. And surfers were 3 times more likely to have antibiotic-resistant bacteria in their guts than the background population. And deaths from antibiotic resistance globally are going to start outweighing deaths from cancer by 2050. So this is a really serious human health problem. We really need more river bathing waters to ensure that there is a legal obligation to clean up rivers and stop toxic pollutants from flowing into the ocean. And I'm going to do a bit of a shameless plug at this point, because we today launched a petition at Surfers Against Sewage calling for at least 200 bathing waters to be designated by 2030. So if you want to sign that petition, do go to our website, www.sas.org.uk/bathing river petition. You should be able to sign that, so that'd be great. But ultimately, we need more Beckies, we need more local campaign groups calling out the big polluters and really holding them to account. So next, we meet Anitra. Anitra is 62. She swims in the sea every day. She's a marine biologist, and after studying the loss of seagrass habitats, decided that she needed to do something about it. So back in the 1980s, so a long time ago, before the decade I was born, so before we all started talking about this stuff, Anitra started planting seagrass. She collects seagrass seeds or sprigs from healthy seagrass meadows and transplants them by hand to damaging coastal areas. She does most of this work by herself, working with locals such as fisherfolk, scientists, and community groups. And she's restored seagrass meadows all over the world and across 5 continents. Her mark has been so significant that you can see her work from space, and she's been dubbed as Seagrass Lady by the United Nations Environment Programme. So seagrass is such an amazing plant. It's so critical to marine life. And seagrass meadows have provided really important fish nurseries, protecting young fish and predators. It dissipates waves, like the strength of waves, so it protects our coastlines from storms and hurricanes. And it's really critical in tackling the climate crisis. So seagrass absorbs carbon at a rate 30 times more than that of rainforests. So it locks carbon into the seafloor. But we're really losing our seagrass habitats all over the world. They're vital for ocean health, and we're losing them along with habitats such as kelp forests and seagrass and salt marshes, and they're being lost at an astonishing rate. We've lost nearly 80% of seagrass meadows around the world in the last 200 years, and they're disappearing at a rate of 7% per year. So we need to protect what remains of them and really restore what we've lost. We need what we call highly protected marine areas, to put in place and enforce. We need them to ban and enforce destructive industries such as mining and industrial fishing to really allow our ocean to recover. With the helping hands of people like Anitra, and if left alone, the ocean really will recover. So next up, we've got Dominique. Dominique is 23. She grew up in inner city London, And whilst she was at school, she started to learn about the severity of the climate crisis. She saw posters in her local community about air pollution, and started to realise that she was actually being slowly poisoned by the toxic air fumes in London. And she heard about people in the front line of the climate crisis losing their homes from extreme weather and sea level rise. As a young person, she started to see the future that she faced and knew she had to take action. So she joined some of the first youth climate strikes. She got into community organising and collaborating with other groups. And in 2021, so just last year, Dominique, along with 5 other young people, organised the Youth Ocean and Climate Summit, bringing together over 100 young people from across the country to produce the Youth Ocean and Climate Manifesto, setting out the calls for the next generation to tackle the ocean and climate emergency. Dominique is one of the forefront of the Fridays for Future movement in the UK. She works closely with some really other inspirational people like Greta Thunberg, etc. And she's really into climate justice. So as I said before, the ocean makes up 70% of the Earth's surface, and we simply can't ignore the ocean in the climate crisis. We need to make sure that ocean's voice is heard. And young people like Dominique, the very people who are going to see the impacts of climate change materialise, are giving the ocean and the youth movement a voice. And that's so important when we talk about activism and climate change and the climate emergency. Finally, I just wanted to talk about Sian Richardson. Sian lives in Pembrokeshire and used to take part in triathlons, marathons and multi-sport events. And in September 2014, her and her friends decided to do something different. She wanted to do something that was less strain on her joints and her wallet, so she started cold water swimming. Gradually, more and more people started joining her. Sometimes these were people who swam anyway, sometimes they were people who wanted to get something new. But they all connected as a group and called themselves the Blue Tits. So this here is a picture of the Pembrokeshire Blue Tits, and you can see Sian here in pink. It's a slightly blurry image, I'm sorry about that. The movement has grown massively, and it's brought people together all over the world around this shared passion of cold water swimming. There's now over 15,000 blue tip groups all over the world. And ultimately, we want to protect and restore what we love. What Sian and the Blue Tips movement has done is connected people with each other and the ocean. For a thriving ocean, we need thriving people. So I'm also hoping that this will work. So just before I finish, I just wanted to show you a short film that we made last year called Thank You Sea. It's basically our love letter to the ocean. It pulls together different stories about the connection to the ocean and reminds us of why we protect it. So I'm hoping that the sound will work, but shout if it doesn't. Hopefully it will work, full stop. Does that sound working?
Yeah, working.
Cool. So I'm just gonna let you take a minute. It's quite, some people find that film very, very emotional.
Yes,
known to cry.
I've been crying, just FYI. I've been crying.
Okay.
Just with the amalgamation of like seeing all these women doing amazing things, and then those stories, like the sea lion one was the funniest, like coming in bubbles on my crotch. But
yeah, always a bit dodgy when that comes on. But yeah, I mean, my message really to you today is that you can be Rachel, you can be Becky, you can be Anitra, Dominique, or Sian, and you can do extraordinary things. And the ocean needs you to do extraordinary things to restore it. So I'm going to leave you with that and say thank you for listening, and ask if you have any questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, firstly, wow, Amy, that was such a good presentation. Honestly, it for me personally just took me back to those first moments when I learned how to dive and how I felt when I was in the ocean. And I'm still trying to get myself together after that video. So apologies for that. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's so impressive. So whilst I wait for some of the audience to warm up with their questions, I'll pose some to you which have come through on email. So one of our students asked to ask you, has it been difficult being a woman and working in the space that you're working in?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think I've had different experiences at different points in my career. I think sometimes it has been challenging, and sometimes I don't notice it, to be quite honest. The biggest time I noticed it is mostly been working in the private sector. So when I worked in kind of the waste and resources kind of sector, which was and probably still is very male dominated. I remember going to a Chartered Institute of Waste Managers Christmas dinner. I was a sort of tag along to one of my bosses who got invited. And I sat at a table of 10, and we were invited by Biffa, who's one of the big waste management companies. And I sat at a table with basically 10 men, and I in a room that was 90% men, you know, white, middle class, beer-bellied men. And I felt like a token woman, and it was awful. And it was probably the worst experience I've ever had, even though it was a free kind of Christmas lunch. So I think I look at where I work now, particularly in the charity sector. You know, Surfers Against Sewage, you might think is quite a male-dominated organisation, but it's not. About 80% of us are women, and at my level, at sort of head of department level, we're 50% women. So there's 4 of us and 2 are women. It gets a little bit less up the chain. So the directors above me, there's one woman out of 3. So does get a little bit less as you move up. So you really do kind of start to notice these things. And there's all kinds of reasons behind that, whether, you know, because women take time out to have families, etc. And usually there's all kinds of like society. I'm not going to go into society issues with that or justify anything either. I personally haven't found it hard. I've just noticed things around me when I've been in different sectors. And I think that changes between private, public and charity. You tend to have it tends to be a lot more equitable if you're in kind of the third sector, and probably in the public sector a little bit as well. But private sector is probably where you notice it most. Don't know if that answers the question.
No, I think, I mean, look, I think it's always good to be able to give an insight, because it's a recurring question we've been seeing coming from a lot of young people throughout the summit, which is, what's it been like for you being a woman working in X? And so I think it's always just good to share stories. I mean, it was one of the questions I had as well, because for me personally, I don't see women very often in conservation roles. And so I think it's just so nice to, you know, see people like yourself. We have another question. It says, SAS seems to be going from strength to strength. What are some of the key moments for the organization over the last few years? That's a nice question.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really interesting. So I've been at Surfers Against Sewage since 2019, so I can probably talk to that over the last few years if we go back to 2019. I mean, I think for us, last year was a massive year for us, both on water quality and the ocean and climate emergency. Obviously, we had COP26, and in Cornwall, we had the G7 come to Cornwall.
Yeah.
So we had a big year for us. One of our biggest, most amazing things that we did last year was a paddle out. So we were in Falmouth, as you know, Falmouth, and we kind of put out, it's always a bit nerve-wracking when you do these actions. You don't quite know how they're going to go down or how many people are going to turn up. But we put out a call to do a protest, essentially a protest on the water. So we're asking people to come with their surfboards, come with their swimming kit, come with their paddle boards, their kayaks, and get out on the water and show the love for the ocean and demand that the ocean is, you know, front and center of climate talks. And it's far exceeded our wildest dreams. We thought, you know, maybe we'll get, you know, 100, 200 people, but I think we had about, the estimates vary, but between 1,000 and 1,500 people, you know, all paddling out from Falmouth Beach, and at the same time, and just the atmosphere was just incredible. The amount of passion that people came with, you know, it helps that it was a nice sunny day in June, of course, but you know, people wanted to get out of the water, but it really, you know, really galvanized the community around their love for the ocean and the need to protect it and restore it, and that was a really special moment for us. We didn't anticipate that many people coming, and we got news coverage all over the world, which is an amazing thing for a campaigner. You know, news coverage for a campaigner is you know, a good thing. You know, you've got to capitalize on it. I think, you know, water quality has been huge for us as well. We really changed our water quality campaign back in 2020, and we started the End Sewage Pollution campaign, and we really galvanized a lot of organizations and community groups around the water quality who were campaigning for water quality, and we brought everyone together. So we can't do it alone. You know, we've been doing a lot of work on this, but other organizations have too. So we brought everyone together in the what we call the End Sewage Pollution Coalition. Together we really drove the attention of water quality up the public and political sphere, and now you can't go a week without seeing, well, I can't, so I noticed it anyway, but you can't go a week without seeing sewage pollution in the news somewhere.
But do you know what, I have to agree with that, because like I mentioned, right, I mean, as a consultant, my experience has predominantly been in the sort of energy renewable sector and very little in water, but my husband does so much in water, and I swear every time I see it on the news, I'm like looking at him going, what? They actually do this? And he's like, yes, that's why they're fined. And I'm like, well, but why? Like, you know, so, you know, it's definitely working, because you're right. It was never covered this much in the news around, you know, what exactly are we doing to our water? So
and I mean, it's really important that we, you know, every organization or every individual that's come together in that way, they have their own way of campaigning on the issue, and we can't ignore that. Everyone has their own strength and weakness, you know, strength to bring to the to their campaign, and it's important to recognize that people will have their own agendas, but we've kind of united around this kind of common theme. So I think we're stronger in numbers, and we recognize that different actors within that movement have different priorities and different agendas, but they, you know, if you bring them all together, you're much more powerful. And we saw that with the for those of you who were following the Environment Act last year, you know, the first draft of that act pretty much had no mention of sewage pollution or sewage in it at all, and by the time it got to royal assent, there were, you know, clauses in there around transparency of data, monitoring. You know, the government have to produce a plan this year as to how they're going to reduce sewage pollution, and there's kind of this overarching target of reducing harm from sewage discharges. Not as far as we wanted it to go, but you know, massive step forward. And you know, and now, as I said earlier, we're really looking at kind of the issues in our rivers, and how that's playing out, and the impact that that's having on the ocean. We can't ignore the rivers in this. You know, we are an ocean conservation charity, but it's all part of one water cycle. You know, we really need to kind of take action to improve the quality of rivers. So I'd say to answer the question, the biggest thing for us last year was the ocean and climate. The ocean and climate agenda was amazing. Culminating in COP, which we were at COP, and we did see some nuggets of hope there, and some nuggets around kind of ocean inclusion in nationally determined contributions and stuff. So that was positive. And just the explosion of the water quality agenda. It's a really emotive issue. People get it. It's really obvious. It's very easy to talk about, and people are shocked by it. Because it's just people just aren't aware of it. So yeah, I'd say those are the biggest things for us. There's loads of them, but I can't possibly go. The Million Mile Clean, we relaunched our beach clean last year. I don't work on the community side of things, but we relaunched our beach clean series last year as a Million Mile Clean to get people out and about, it back into the environment. And we thought, we might get 1 million miles cleaned by our volunteer network. We didn't expect it. We achieved it in like August or September last year. We had 1 million miles cleaned. So that was amazing. The community grassroots action is so key to what we do. We just can't do it without people on the ground really making their voices heard.
I'm going to use that as a sound clip, because it is one of the things I always push for so much. I'm like, action at the grassroots level has just so much more ability to stick with people and create more impact. So yeah, thank you for that soundbite, because I'm definitely
no worries.
But it's interesting that you mentioned all these different, COP26, G7. So it's just a nice segue into the next question. So one of the audience members have asked, based on the work you do at Surfers Against Sewage, what is your take on the historic UNEP treaty on ending plastic pollution?
Oh yeah, the last week's one. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely amazing. We was like, it's something that's been on the table for the last 3 years, and it was so good to see that come to fruition. It's the first step, of course. We're definitely not at the end of the line on this. But it was absolutely fantastic to see that vote, and the fact that it was, it's going to be legally binding, mostly legally binding. It's going to cover the full life cycle of plastics. It's going to cover not just marine plastics, but plastics in all environments. And I that's so important. Plastics is a transboundary issue, as we all know. We're not going to be able to tackle that problem unless we tackle it as a global community. And that really was, I'm stealing sound bites from others, but that really was the Paris moment for plastics. For
100%.
Sure. Yeah. So it was just, we were so pleased to see it come. And we've been campaigning on this issue, and personally I've been campaigning on this issue for a long time. And I wasn't there in Nairobi, and I haven't been working on that treaty to say so. I can't take credit for that, but massive kudos to the people who did do so much work to drive that through, because it was amazing to see come to light. And hopefully we can get a great treaty drafted up over the next 2 years.
Yeah. And I think that's what's the most promising thing to see, right? It's the level of impetus from all parts of society around all these issues, where you see people really rallying around. Like you said, you managed to do your million mile cleanup within such a short space of time, because I think people are also hungry for things they can do to take action. So I just think that that's so positive. Okay. One more question from emails, and then I'll just flip to the audience for any questions from them. So this is a really good one. Someone's asking, how's your surfing coming along?
Not very well. I'm a progressing beginner, I think I would say. I'm actually signed up to do a sort of quite intense women's only surf course in May in Newquay, which will be fun. But yeah, it's I love it though. It's so much fun. It's so good to get out in the water, and I'm just about being able to get waves. I'm just about able to kind of paddle out the back and get some of the smaller kind of breaking waves. It's much easier in the white water, but you can, and it's just so. I mean, the feeling of just being sat, even if you're just sat on a board, watching the waves break, these kind of like sparkling droplets of water kind of fall, spray off the back, and so the sunlight behind it. I'm painting another magic image for you here. It's just very special. Even if you can't really surf that well, you can pretend you're cool. You can pretend you're cool by just sitting on a surfboard and going, yeah, I'm cool. I'm not really that cool.
It's kind of like me when I dive, when they're like, you're floating up. I was like, sorry, I'm trying. Still trying to figure it out.
Control your buoyancy.
Yeah, exactly. Control your buoyancy. And it's so funny. Like, I keep looking down at everyone below me, and I always look up going, come back down. So but I'm sure it does masses for your mental health as well.
Oh yeah, it does. And we've seen, as I said earlier, we've seen, massive boom in water sports activities over, the course of the pandemic. And, people are really starting to, really appreciate their environment and their blue space. We need it. We need it to nourish us, and both mentally and physically. I mean, it's started getting sunny now, actually, down in Cornwall. It was raining when I started this talk, and I'm looking out the window, it's sunny, and so I might go and have a cold dip in the ocean after this.
Nice. Oh, yeah. I'm jealous. I wish I could do the same. So one last question from the audience. This is really nice. They ask, was it always your aspiration to work in this space? And if so, what would you tell your 10-year-old self now?
Oh, that's such a good question, isn't it? I think I've always known that because I've always worked in the environmental sector since I sort of left uni in various different guises. And I always knew that I wanted to work in a space where I made a difference, a small difference. I make a small difference. I can't claim to make a huge impact, but whatever you can do in the smallest way is important. And the environment is so important to me. And I did a third year project at university. This is going back a long time ago, around. I linked my two subjects, so psychology and geography, and I did a third year lecture on environmental psychology, and that was really around kind of the connection people how do people value the environment, and how do people connect to it, and the fact that we want to protect what we love and what's close to us. And ever since then, I've kind of really driven my path in that direction. At one point, I decided I thought I might go into teaching, and I didn't. It's probably a good decision. Sorry, any teachers that are among us. Yeah, I've always wanted to work in this space, and like I said, I've flitted between various different guises of that. And what was the last part of that question? So what would I give? What would advice?
Your 10-year-old self, what would you say to them?
Don't be scared. Don't be scared, and have confidence in yourself. And I'm still not a very confident person. I'm still very self-critical. And I think the message I'd say to me when I'm younger is really have faith in yourself. I mean, I should say that to myself now, to be honest. Not let alone my 10-year-old self, my 30 almost 8-year-old self. Have confidence in what you can do, and believe in yourself. That's for sure what I'd say.
Oh, well, Amy, thank you so much. I think that's such a nice note to finish on. So firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving us your time. As with a lot of what we do, it's very much focused on education. So I know that all the people who'll be watching this will get so much out of this. And I know there've also been a lot of young people really looking to the summit to understand how they can get involved. So I just thank you for being such a great example. And just once again, happy International Women's Day. And thank you for sharing your time with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.